My name is Judd, and today I'm going to talk about my Italian family. We here at the museum, Maine Paper and Heritage Museum, have a lot of immigrants, and a lot of them were Italians coming over amongst the Polish and the Finnish and a lot of others. But today I'm going to talk a little bit about my family. They came over in 1902. My grandfather was 17, and a year later, my grandmother came over at 14. My grandfather was from Pacicio, my grandmother was from Pacentro, and North and South were not supposed to have a relationship. But they got together over here, and they both ended up in Burlington, New Hampshire, and then later on came down to Canton, Maine, and they got married, had 5 children. His agent down here, Livonia's, set him up in a tannery in Canton, and they canned string beans and corn, and he worked there for several years. Then he lost some fingers, and so he began to farm. So he became a farmer, grew his own beef and grew his own vegetables and whatnot. Well, they had to cut their own wood back then with no safety features, so he lost a few more fingers. And I had a couple uncles that lost a few fingers too, because as kids they were made to chop wood and they'd lose their fingers. So it was hard on them. He had 5 kids, all under the age of 6, and it was hard to find work back then. So he did the best he could to raise his children, because back then a lot of them didn't go to school; they had to stay home and work. One of the things that plays in my mind as a kid, we would go up and visit him on a Sunday, and he always had this pot on the stove in the kitchen, and he would call it stew. So he'd say, "Go ahead, try that stew, see if you like it." Well, come to find out, thank God I only did it once. That was the slop pot for the pigs. So he'd throw everything in there and boil it and give it to the pigs. But he'd tease us kids. He'd like to tease kids. And finally, my mother said, "I don't know if I'm going to take you up there anymore. He teases you pretty bad." Well, I don't remember that part of it, but we continued to go up and see him anyway. Well, one day when I was first going to work in the mill down here, I got a phone call from Ham's Drugstore, if I told you this or not. And the drugstore said to me, "Do you know a Bartholomew Romano?" I'm like, "Yes." He said, "Well, he's down here with this Model A tractor, and he doesn't have a license, and I can't let him go back on it. The police won't let him out of town." I'm like, "Okay, I'll be down in a few minutes," because my grandfather didn't speak English, and I didn't speak Italian. So I got him in my car, took him home. We sat facing each other at the kitchen table waiting for my father to get home and just staring at each other. We couldn't talk. And my dad came home and finally went down and got the tractor, brought it to the house, and he let him go home from there with the tractor. But yeah, he had this old Model A tractor, never got a license back then. He just went around town with it, so he thought it was fine once they closed the pharmacy in Canton to go to Livermore. No, it didn't work too good. But that was just one of the many things that would happen back then. The immigrants wouldn't teach you Italian because they didn't want everybody to know they were immigrants. So they didn't do anything that would, show people that they were immigrants. So one of the things you weren't allowed to do was speak foreign. And I certainly wish I could speak Italian today. And I know he entered the boat in Naples. He got on the boat in Naples and came to Ellis Island. I know that. But yeah, it was just poor times over there, and everybody that could come to the United States for their new future came. It was better than starving, So yeah, they worked hard over here. I mean, you had dig ditches, you had bricklayers, and there was Italians that helped build this house. This is an Italian ornate house, and you can see where they chiseled out the puzzle brick. It's beautiful, I mean, they did everything by hand. It's just amazing once you look back on their work and the skill they had to. So later on in life, I planned a trip to Italy, and the travel agency that I went through, little did they know that I had ended up having to drive 7.5 hours to get to my family. They thought that I had some kind of transport. Even though they set it up, they didn't realize it was 7.5 hours from where I landed to my family. So the car they had saved for us was a minivan, and over in Italy it's all little cars. This was a big one. Actually, it was big. So that was a difficulty right there. And then I had to travel 7.5 hours at night, and I wasn't familiar with the roads. It was all mountains and huge ravines. And I stopped at a gas station before I went into the mountains, and I said, how far to Central? He said about 7.5 hours. I about died. Just me and my 2 girls, and they were out of high school, just out of high school. And he said, you ladies aren't traveling alone, are you? I'm like, yes. He said, you don't do that over here. I'm like, oh, this is a good time for me to learn that. So off we went, and over in Italy at that time anyway, the trucks stayed in the right lane and the vehicles stayed in the left lane. And if you didn't keep up with the vehicles, they'd bump you. And you had, like I said, you had 40-foot or better ravines on both sides, and you're going to go over the guardrail. So we had to drive 85 to 90 miles an hour all the time for 7.5 hours. Couldn't get my girls to take over. They wouldn't touch the wheel. So I was like this, all the way over. So we got to the mountain. The bed and breakfast guy, who was 24 years old, putting himself through college, and opened up this bed and breakfast for the first time. And he thought we weren't coming because we were 7.5 hours late, because my timing wasn't the same as what was planned. So I called him and I said, I'm running late. He said, okay, this is what you're going to have to do. He said, you go to the mountain, to the top of the mountain. There's one bar up there. It'll be open at 12:30 when you get there. You take my phone number to the bartender and have him call me, and I will send someone to get you and take you to the bed and breakfast. So we get to the mountain, and I looked at the girls. I said, okay, we're going in there. Oh, no, we're not going in there. I said, oh, yeah, I'm not going in there alone. We're going. So we go in the bar, and to my surprise, there was people in there in their 80s, couples, having a drink and some munchies. 12:30 at night. I'm like, wow, this is fascinating, So I went to the bartender, gave him the number. He called, and he says to me, he's sending someone. So we're sitting there, and this young kid comes in. Chains everywhere, black leather, rings everywhere, tattoos. And I'm like, I don't know this person. I didn't know what to do. I really didn't. We were scared to death because he looked like he was right out of the Gothic devil, But he came over to me and he said, I'm here to take you to the bed and breakfast. So I'm following him through this dirt road. I mean, the tree limbs are hanging over it. And I'm like, oh, yeah. This is no bed and breakfast we're going to. We're going to get rolled for sure. Well, it was. It was a beautiful bed and breakfast. And we had it all to ourselves because the 24-year-old weren't coming till the next morning. So we had it all to ourselves. He showed us where the key was, and it was beautiful. It had flowers all around it. You could see the mountains. It just made my day because I was tired, So we stayed there, and the next day I went to find one of the family members, and I had a picture. That's all I had. And a guy was outside, the chef of the only restaurant on the mountain, was outside having a cigarette. And I showed him the picture, and he pointed down the street through cobblestones. He pointed down the street. So I went down with my picture, and I went through these beads in the store, and there she was, a woman in the picture, and I showed her the picture, and she says, family, family. She gets on her cell phone and calls all the family up, and they all came over. Well, the ones that weren't working came over. I spent the day with them, even though we couldn't speak. They had a friend from Canada there, and she came over for an hour to translate. So then she had to go. So we walked around the mountain, and on the mountain they had a fort they had built to protect this princess of the mountain. So she walked me all around and showed me the fort and the church and, where everybody else lived. And I said to her, she had three girls, and they were going to go to college. I said, what's going to happen with the mountain once the young people leave? And she said, that's what our worry is. They don't want to come back. And so she said, we're really concerned about that. We'd love to have family or friends, and only family or friends, to buy some of the villas on the mountain. So my goal is to go there next year and see what they have of villas. I would love to live there. So, we'll see how that all works out. But that's kind of the story of my family. They were very upset because I couldn't stay with them overnight because we had reservations someplace else. But they're very family oriented. They took us in, gave us You know, they always feed you. Italians always feed you. Gave us stuff to eat and drink, and you know, like I said, we kept in touch through email through the girls in college. But then they left. We'd have no idea where they went or anything. So I'm kind of anxious to go back there and look everybody up and see my cousins again, and you know, just get together. And my daughter-in-law, who's quite interested in Italy, says if you find a villa, let me know. I might help you out. So that would be great. A family villa over there.